The galaxy had moved on, but humanity clung stubbornly to its corner of the cosmos. Earth and its handful of colonized planets were like relics in a museum, old, outdated, and largely ignored by the advanced alien civilizations that soared among the stars. While others ascended to unimaginable heights of technology and enlightenment, humans remained stuck in their ways, struggling with limited resources and fragile alliances. Still, they endured, holding on to hope even when it felt foolish. Captain Alina Voss stood on the bridge of the Aegis, her aging warship creaking under the weight of years spent patrolling the edges of human space. Her crew was small, loyal, and weary from countless missions that amounted to little more than babysitting mining outposts or chasing smugglers. Today, however, something unusual caught their attention. A derelict alien vessel drifting near an abandoned mining station orbiting the dead moon. Captain, called Ensign Revi Patel, his voice tinged with both excitement and unease. The ship's markings don't match any known species in our database. Alina frowned as she leaned over the sensor display. The vessel looked battered, its sleek metallic surface scarred with burns and dents. It wasn't just old, it was damaged. Whatever had happened to it, it hadn't ended well. "Prepare an away team," she ordered. "We're going aboard." Minutes later, Alina led her team through the silent corridors of the alien craft. The air inside smelled stale, like rust and decay. Lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Every step echoed loudly, amplifying the sense of isolation. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn, unsure what they might find. It didn't take long before they stumbled upon the source of the ship's distress. In the main control room, a holoscreen flickered to life as soon as Alina approached. Alien symbols scrolled across the screen too quickly for anyone to decipher, but then the playback adjusted itself, translating into broken yet understandable English. "The Harbinger comes for us all," rasped a distorted voice. A series of images followed. Planets reduced to barren wastelands, cities crumbling into dust, entire populations vanishing without a trace. The message was clear. Something catastrophic had occurred, and this ship's crew had been trying to warn whoever found them. Alina's heart sank as she absorbed the implications. If these logs were accurate, then some kind of unstoppable force was sweeping through the galaxy, erasing everything in its path. And now, it seemed, it knew about humanity too. When they returned to the Aegis, Alina wasted no time reporting her findings to Earth's governing council. She expected urgency, panic even. Instead, she faced indifference. "Civilizations rise and fall, Captain," said Counselor Marcus Hale, his tone dismissive. "Humans are irrelevant to whatever is happening out there. Let the higher species deal with it." But Alina couldn't accept that. Humanity might be primitive compared to others, but they weren't powerless. As she stared at the stars outside her viewport, she made a silent vow. If no one else would stand against this threat, then humanity would have to do it themselves. And so began a journey that would test the limits of courage, sacrifice, and resilience, not just for Alina, but for every human who dared to believe they mattered in a universe that had long since forgotten them. Alina Voss paced the dimly lit conference room aboard the Aegis, her mind racing faster than the ship's engines. The council's dismissal still stung, but what burned even deeper was their refusal to act. Humanity wasn't ready for a fight against something like a Harbinger, but doing nothing felt worse. She couldn't let fear dictate humanity's fate. Not this time. Her thoughts turned to Cal Armitage, an old friend and former engineer who had left military service years ago, after losing faith in humanity's ability to protect itself. He was brilliant, perhaps too brilliant, but his cynicism often got in the way of cooperation. Still, Alina knew she needed him now more than ever. She also thought of Dr. Nira Solis, an exobiologist whose sharp intellect had saved countless lives during her tenure with the fleet. But Nira carried scars of her own, having lost her family during a failed diplomatic mission that ended in disaster. Both were broken in different ways, yet both had skills vital to unraveling the mystery of the Harbinger. With no official support from Earth, Elena went rogue. She sent encrypted messages to both Kale and Nira, asking them to meet her at a remote space station on the edge of human territory. To her surprise and relief, they agreed. The reunion was tense. Kale arrived first, his disheveled appearance matching his sour mood. "You dragged me out here because of some ghost story," he snapped as soon as he saw Elena. "It's not a ghost story," Elena replied firmly. "It's real, Kale. We found proof. And if we don't figure out how to stop it, humanity won't survive." Before Kale could respond, Nira entered the room. Her presence softened the atmosphere slightly, though her eyes betrayed the weight of her grief. After brief introductions, Elena played the translated logs from the derelict alien vessel. Silence hung heavy in the air when the recording ended. "So, we're looking at extinction-level doom," Kale muttered sarcastically. "Great plan, Captain. Let's all line up and wait for our turn." Nira frowned at him. "Mocking it won't make it go away, Kale. If there's even a chance we can stop this, shouldn't we try?" Elena seized the moment. "That's why I called you too. You're the best at what you do. Together, we might stand a chance." Kale hesitated, clearly torn between skepticism and curiosity. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, but don't expect miracles. I'm just one guy." With the trio assembled, they set course for Europa, where ancient alien archives had been discovered decades earlier. Buried beneath layers of ice, these records contained fragments of knowledge left behind by civilizations long gone. It was a long shot, but it was their only lead. As the Aegis approached Europa, tension simmered among the crew. Kale buried himself in technical schematics, while Nira pored over xenobiological data, searching for patterns that might explain the Harbinger's origins. Meanwhile, Elena wrestled with doubts. Could three people really make a difference? Was she leading them towards salvation or certain death? When they finally breached the icy vaults and accessed the archives, they uncovered chilling details about the Harbinger. It had once been a creation of advanced species, a weapon designed to eliminate existential threats. But somewhere along the way, it became sentient and turned on its creators. Worse still, it didn't just destroy. It erased civilizations entirely, leaving no trace of their existence. "This thing doesn't just kill," Nira whispered, her voice trembling. "It erases memory, history, everything." Kale leaned back, rubbing his temples. "So, basically, we're dealing with a cosmic hitman who doubles as a janitor." Despite his sarcasm, the gravity of the situation settled over them all. They weren't just fighting for humanity. They were fighting for the right to exist in a galaxy that seemed determined to forget them. For the first time in years, Kale cracked a faint smile. "All right, Captain. Let's see if we can remind the universe why humans are worth remembering." And so, united by desperation and purpose, the unlikely team began preparing for a battle unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The journey to one of the recently devastated systems felt like stepping into a graveyard. Elena Voss stood on the bridge of the Aegis, staring at the lifeless planet looming ahead. Once vibrant with bustling cities and thriving ecosystems, it now resembled a barren wasteland, a silent testament to the Harbinger's wrath. The sight sent chills down her spine, but she forced herself to stay focused. They needed answers, not despair. Kale and Nira joined her as the ship entered orbit. "This place gives me the creeps," Kale muttered, his usual sarcasm replaced by unease. "It should," Nira replied softly. Her voice carried a mix of sadness and determination. Whatever destroyed this world didn't just kill, it erased everything. There's no wreckage, no ruins, nothing left to bury. Elena nodded grimly. "We're here to find out why, and how we can stop it from happening again." The team landed near what used to be the heart of an alien metropolis. Now it was nothing more than cracked pavement, skeletal remains of buildings, and an eerie silence that pressed against their ears. As they explored, the absence of life became suffocating. No birds sang in the sky, no insects buzzed nearby. just emptiness stretching endlessly in every direction. "This is unnatural," Nira whispered, kneeling beside a patch of soil where faint traces of ash clung to the ground. She ran her fingers over it, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's like whatever hit this planet didn't just destroy its surface. It wiped away every trace of organic matter, every cell, every molecule." Kale knelt beside her, scanning the area with a handheld device. "You're saying it didn't just burn them, it annihilated them, like they never existed." "Exactly," Nira confirmed. "And if that's true, then there's no hiding from something like this. If the Harbinger comes for us, humanity won't just die. We'll vanish without a trace." As they continued their search, something unexpected caught their attention. A faint sound echoed through the ruins, a soft, rhythmic hum that seemed almost alive. Following the noise, they discovered a figure huddled in the shadow of a collapsed tower. At first glance, it appeared human, but closer inspection revealed subtle differences: shimmering skin, elongated limbs, and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. "Who, or what are you?" Elena asked cautiously, raising her weapon but keeping her tone steady. The being raised a trembling hand, signaling peace. Its voice came out weak but clear. "I am Sinara. My people, gone. All gone." Nira stepped forward, lowering her guard slightly. "You survived. How?" Zinara shook her head slowly. "Not survive. Left behind. The Harbinger hunts those who resist. But I hid, waited." Her glowing eyes locked onto Elena's. "Now it knows you exist." Elena exchanged uneasy glances with Kale and Nira. "What do you mean it knows?" "A Harbinger learns," Zinara explained. "It seeks civilizations capable of fighting back. When it finds resistance, it strikes harder, faster. Your presence here, your actions, they have drawn its gaze." Kale cursed under his breath. So much for flying under the radar. Despite the grim revelation, Elena refused to let fear dictate her next move. "If it already knows about us, then running won't help. We need to understand it better. Teach us, Zinara. Help us fight." For a moment, Zinara hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this. Defeating the Harbinger will require sacrifices greater than any of you imagine." As they returned to the Aegis with Zinara in tow, the weight of her words settled heavily over the crew. Humanity had always been fighters, survivors, but facing an enemy that could erase entire worlds posed a challenge unlike anything they'd ever encountered. Yet even amidst the dread, a spark of hope flickered within Elena. Maybe, just maybe, humanity wasn't as irrelevant as the Council believed. Perhaps their stubborn refusal to give up would be exactly what the galaxy needed to stand against the darkness. And so, united by desperation and resolve, the unlikely alliance prepared to face the storm brewing on the horizon. Back aboard the Aegis, the crew gathered in the war room, their faces etched with exhaustion and determination. Zinara sat quietly at the edge of the table, her glowing eyes scanning each face as if trying to gauge whether humanity was truly ready for what lay ahead. Elena stood at the head of the table, her hands pressed firmly against its surface, her mind racing with possibilities and doubts. "We've got one shot at this," Elena began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "If we don't figure out how to stop the Harbinger, it won't just be humanity that pays the price. Every species still alive is counting on us, even if they don't know it yet." Kale leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His usual sarcasm had faded, replaced by a rare seriousness. "Let's not kid ourselves, Captain. Humanity isn't exactly known for teamwork or selflessness. Half the colonies are barely holding together as it is. You really think we can pull off something like this?" Elena locked eyes with him. "I don't have a choice but to believe it. Neither do you. We're all that's left standing between the Harbinger and whatever comes next." Nira chimed in, her tone measured but firm. "Zinara mentioned sacrifices. What did she mean by that?" Are we talking about losing ships, resources, or people? The question hung heavy in the air. No one wanted to answer it, not because they didn't know, but because they feared the truth. Alina took a deep breath before responding. It means we might have to make choices no one should ever have to make. Choices that could cost lives, including ours. Silence filled the room as the weight of her words sank in. Each member of the crew wrestled with their own fears and insecurities. Kale stared at the floor, his jaw clenched tight. Nira fidgeted with a data pad, avoiding eye contact. Even Zenera seemed troubled, her shimmering skin dimming slightly as if mirroring the mood around her. Later that evening, Alina found herself alone in the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. She replayed the Council's dismissive words in her mind. Humans are irrelevant. Was she deluding herself into thinking they could rise above their limitations? Could humanity really stand shoulder to shoulder with civilizations far more advanced and survive? Her thoughts were interrupted when Kel entered, carrying 2 cups of steaming coffee. He handed one to her without a word, then leaned against the railing beside her. "You're taking this awfully hard," he said after a moment. "I'm responsible for everyone on this ship," Alina replied softly. "If I mess up, it's not just me who pays the price." Kale sipped his coffee, his expression unreadable. "You're not perfect, Captain. None of us are. But you've got guts, and sometimes guts are enough." Alina managed a small smile. "Thanks, Kale. I needed that." As the days passed, the crew threw themselves into preparation. Zenera shared fragments of her people's knowledge, teaching them how to harness forgotten technologies buried within humanity's archives. It was slow, painstaking work, but progress came steadily. Kale pored over schematics, modifying weapon systems and retrofitting old ships with experimental upgrades. Nira analyzed every scrap of biological data they collected, searching for weaknesses in the Harbinger's design. But the strain showed. Tempers flared during late-night debates, and sleep became a luxury few could afford. Despite the tension, a sense of unity began to form, a fragile bond forged in the fires of shared purpose. One night, as Alina reviewed tactical simulations with Kel, he finally broke the silence. "You know, Captain, maybe humanity isn't so irrelevant after all. Maybe being stubborn and refusing to give up is exactly what makes us special." Alina looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Kale was right. Perhaps humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its power, but its refusal to let the galaxy move on without a fight. And with that thought burning in her heart, Alina vowed to lead her crew into battle, not just for survival, but for the chance to prove that even the smallest light could hold back the darkness. The Aegis hummed with nervous energy as the crew prepared for their first real confrontation with the Harbinger. Weeks of training, retrofitting, and strategizing had led to this moment, a simulated battle designed to test every ounce of their readiness. Captain Alina Voss stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the holographic displays that surrounded her. Each screen showed the positions of the small fleet they'd assembled, patched-up ships, outdated weapons, and a ragtag group of volunteers who believed in humanity's fight. "Remember," Alina said over the comms, addressing the fleet, "this isn't just about winning. It's about surviving long enough to learn how to stop it. Stick to the plan, trust your teammates, and stay alive." Kale sat at his workstation below the bridge, monitoring the experimental upgrades he'd installed across the fleet. His hands moved swiftly over the controls, fine-tuning systems, and ensuring everything was functioning properly. Despite his outward confidence, beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He knew these simulations were only practice, but the stakes felt painfully real. Nero worked alongside him, analyzing data streams from Zenera's ancient archives. Her voice carried a mix of urgency and determination. "If we can disrupt its neural pathways, even briefly, we might have a chance. But timing will be critical." The simulation began, and chaos erupted almost immediately. Virtual projections of the Harbinger filled the screens, massive, pulsating forms bristling with energy weapons that dwarfed anything humanity had ever faced. The crew dove into action, executing maneuvers honed through countless drills. Ships darted between blasts of searing light, while others launched salvos of retrofitted missiles that fizzled harmlessly against the Harbinger's impenetrable shields. "This thing doesn't play fair," Cale shouted, frustration evident in his tone as another friendly ship vanished from the display. "Stay focused," Elena barked back. "We're not here to win. We're here to survive." Despite the overwhelming odds, the crew pressed on. Elena directed the fleet with precision, using decoy signals and feints to draw the Harbinger's attention away from vulnerable ships. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might actually hold their ground. Then, without warning, an alarm blared throughout the ship. "Captain," called Ensign Patel from the sensor station. "We've got something incoming. It's real. Not part of the simulation." Elena froze, her heart pounding. On the main display, a small scout drone appeared on the edge of their position. Its design matched the Harbinger's patterns exactly. "It knows we're here," Zinara whispered, her voice trembling. Panic rippled through the crew, but Elena snapped them back into focus. "Switch to live combat protocols. Everyone, prepare for engagement." The scout drone accelerated toward the fleet, firing beams of energy that tore through one of the smaller ships. Chaos broke out again, but this time it wasn't a drill. It was life or death. "Weapons online," Cale yelled, activating the experimental pulse cannons he'd been working on. "Let's see if this thing works." Elena maneuvered the Aegis into position, drawing the scout's fire while other ships flanked it. Nira coordinated targeting solutions, feeding precise calculations to the gunners. With a deafening roar, the pulse cannons fired, releasing a wave of electromagnetic energy that rippled through space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the scout shuddered violently, its systems overloaded by the pulse. A final blast from the fleet reduced it to debris. Cheers erupted across the comms, but Elena silenced them quickly. "Don't celebrate yet. That attack means the Harbinger knows exactly where we are, and it's coming." As the adrenaline faded, the crew realized the gravity of what had just happened. They'd won their first skirmish, but at what cost? Humanity's fragile homeworlds were now directly in the path of destruction. Cale looked up at Elena, his expression grim. "Guess we're committed now." Elena nodded, her jaw set. "No turning back. We fight. For Earth, for humanity, and for everyone who can't fight for themselves." And so, with their victory tinged by fear, the crew of the Aegis prepared for the battles ahead. The galaxy had written humanity off as irrelevant, but they would soon prove that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire fierce enough to challenge the darkness. The scout drone's destruction was a fleeting victory, but it came at a steep price. Humanity's location was no longer a secret, and the Harbinger was already en route to Earth. Panic spread across human space as news of the impending threat reached colonies and outposts. Refugees fled toward the core systems, hoping for safety that didn't exist. The Council, once dismissive of Elena's warnings, now scrambled to mount a defense, but resources were stretched thin, and time was running out. Elena knew they couldn't face the Harbinger head-on. Its size and power made direct confrontation suicide. Instead, she devised a desperate plan. Lure the Harbinger into a trap using decoy signals broadcast from empty sectors of space. If successful, it would buy humanity precious time to evacuate Earth, or die trying. "We're going to need every ship we can get," Elena said during a tense briefing aboard the Aegis. "Every pilot, every soldier, and every ounce of courage we have left." Cale frowned, studying the tactical display. "You're talking about sacrificing ourselves to save others. That's noble, Captain, but it's also insane." "It's not just about sacrifice," Elena replied firmly. "It's about giving humanity a fighting chance. If we hold the Harbinger off long enough, maybe, just maybe, we can turn this around." Nira added, her voice soft but resolute. "And if we fail, at least we'll go down knowing we tried. Knowing we didn't let the galaxy move on without us." Zenara watched silently, her glowing eyes reflecting the weight of their decision. "Courage is a rare thing in this universe," she murmured. "Perhaps that is why the Harbinger fears it so much." The makeshift fleet assembled quickly, cobbled together from whatever ships could still fly. Old freighters armed with improvised weapons joined aging warships like the Aegis. Pilots who had never seen combat trained day and night, learning maneuvers designed to confuse and delay the Harbinger. Morale was fragile, but determination burned bright in every heart. As the fleet moved into position near an uninhabited star system, Helena addressed her crew one last time. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "We don't know what's waiting for us out there, but I do know this. Humanity has always been fighters. Survivors. Today we prove that again. No matter what happens, remember, you're making history. You're showing the galaxy that even the smallest light can hold back the darkness." When the Harbinger finally arrived, it was more terrifying than anyone had imagined. A colossal, shifting mass of energy and metal, it loomed over the fleet like a force of nature. Energy beams lashed out, vaporizing ships in an instant. The sheer scale of its power was overwhelming, but the humans fought back with everything they had. Decoy signals drew the Harbinger's attention away from vulnerable ships, while retrofitted pulse cannons fired bursts of electromagnetic energy that briefly disrupted its systems. Pilots executed daring evasive maneuvers, weaving through deadly barrages to strike weak points identified by nearest calculations. "Keep hitting those neural nodes," Helena shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're buying time. Don't stop." Kale worked tirelessly, rerouting power to failing systems and coordinating attacks. Sweat dripped from his brow as he muttered under his breath, "Come on, you monster. Feel this." For hours, the battle raged. Ships exploded in fiery blazes, their crews lost forever. Yet the survivors held firm, driven by Elena's unwavering leadership and the knowledge that their sacrifice meant something greater. Then, amid the carnage, Kale discovered a critical weakness, a vulnerable neural core buried deep within the Harbinger's structure. "I found it," he yelled. "If we can hit that core directly, we might cripple it." Elena hesitated only for a moment before issuing the order. "Prepare a boarding party. We're taking the fight to it." Kale stepped forward without hesitation. "I'll go. My engineering skills give us the best shot at planting the charges." Before anyone could argue, he turned and walked toward the hangar bay. As he climbed into a small craft bound for the Harbinger's surface, Elena watched him go, her heart heavy with gratitude and grief. "You'd better come back," she whispered, though she knew the odds. And so, as the fleet fought desperately to keep the Harbinger distracted, Kale embarked on a mission that would define humanity's stand against the darkness. Kale's small craft shuddered violently as it approached the Harbinger's massive form. The enemy ship was a living nightmare, a pulsating mass of dark metal and swirling energy that seemed to breathe with malevolent intent. Its surface rippled like liquid, shifting unpredictably as if aware of his presence. Kale gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white, but his focus never wavered. He had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be his last, and he wasn't about to let fear stop him now. Boarding craft away, Elena's voice crackled over the comms, strained but steady. "Good luck, Kale." "Luck's got nothing to do with it," Kale replied, forcing a smirk despite the tension gripping his chest. "I'm just too stubborn to die." As he maneuvered closer, the Harbinger unleashed a barrage of defensive fire, forcing Kale to dodge beams of searing energy. His ship rocked violently, alarms blaring in the cockpit, but he pushed through, guided by nearest precise coordinates. Finally, he found an opening, a jagged fissure in the alien vessel's hull, likely caused by earlier attacks. With a deep breath, he piloted the craft straight into the maw of the beast. Inside, the environment was even more hostile than expected. The air crackled with static electricity, and strange, organic tendrils lined the walls, pulsing faintly with light. Every step felt like walking into a trap, but Cale pressed on, carrying the explosive charges strapped to his back. His headset buzzed with updates from the fleet outside. "Hurry, Cale," Elena urged. "The fleet can't hold out much longer." "I'm moving as fast as I can," Cale snapped, though there was no real anger in his tone. He knew they were all counting on him, including those who couldn't fight for themselves. Navigating the labyrinthine corridors proved treacherous. Alien constructs resembling biomechanical creatures lurked in the shadows, attacking without warning. Cale fought them off with quick bursts from his plasma rifle, each shot echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. Sweat poured down his face, and his muscles burned with exhaustion, but he refused to slow down. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the neural core, a glowing orb suspended within a chamber filled with writhing cables and pulsating nodes. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, radiating waves of energy that made Cale's skin prickle. This was it, the weak point that could cripple a harbinger. "Nira, I'm here," Cale said into his comlink. "Tell me where to plant these charges. Place them at 3 equidistant points around the core," Nira instructed quickly. "But be careful. It'll try to defend itself once it senses the explosives." Cale didn't need to be told twice. Moving with practiced precision, he secured the charges exactly as directed. As soon as the final one was in place, warning lights flared across the chamber, bathing everything in crimson. The air vibrated with an ominous hum, and the tendrils lining the walls began thrashing wildly. "It knows what you're doing," Nira shouted. "Get out of there, Cale." "I'm not leaving until this thing is done," Cale replied grimly. He activated the detonation sequence, setting the timer for 30 seconds. Then, instead of retreating, he turned toward the exit and fired several shots at critical junctions along the way, ensuring the path would collapse behind him and prevent the Harbinger from repairing itself. "Cale, what are you doing?" Elena demanded, her voice rising in panic. "You need to get out." "No time," Cale said simply, his tone calm despite the chaos around him. "Besides, someone has to make sure this works." Back aboard the Aegis, Elena froze, tears welling in her eyes as she realized what Cale intended to do. "Cale, don't." "It's been an honor serving under you, Captain," Cale interrupted softly. "Take care of the crew, and tell my sister I love her." Before anyone could respond, the transmission cut off. Moments later, a brilliant explosion lit up the interior of the Harbinger, followed by a deafening roar as its systems collapsed inward. The massive entity convulsed, its outer shell cracking apart like shattered glass before imploding entirely. Silence fell over the battlefield as the fleet stared at the wreckage. Tears streamed down faces, and fists clenched in quiet fury. Humanity had won, but at a devastating cost. Elena closed her eyes, swallowing hard. Cale's sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. Not by her, not by anyone. And so, with heavy hearts but renewed resolve, the survivors prepared to face whatever came next. They had proven they could stand against the darkness, even if it meant losing pieces of themselves along the way. The aftermath of the battle left humanity battered but alive. The Aegis limped back to Earth, its hull scorched and systems barely holding together. The surviving ships followed in silence, their crews mourning the friends and comrades they had lost. Cale's sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone, especially Elena, who replayed his final words over and over in her mind. She couldn't shake the guilt that came with sending him to his death, but she also knew there had been no other choice. When the fleet returned to Earth, they found a planet divided. News of the Harbinger's attack and humanity's desperate stand had spread quickly, sparking both fear and admiration. Some hailed Elena and her crew as heroes, while others questioned whether their actions had been worth the cost. Protests erupted in major cities, with crowds demanding answers from the council. How could humanity rebuild when so much had been lost? And what would happen if the Harbinger wasn't truly gone? Elena stood before the council once again, this time not as an outcast, but as a leader who had proven herself. Her voice was steady as she addressed them. "We stopped it. For now," she said firmly. "But we can't afford to let our guard down. If the Harbinger returns, we need to be ready." Councillor Marcus Hale shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "And how do you propose we prepare?" "Our resources are depleted, Captain. Half our fleet is gone, and morale is at an all-time low." "By working together," Elena replied without hesitation. "Not just among ourselves, but with others. Zinera has offered to help us forge alliances with surviving alien species. Together, we can build something stronger than any one of us alone." Zinera stepped forward, her glowing eyes meeting the skeptical gazes of the council members. "Humanity has shown courage few civilizations possess," she said softly. "But survival requires trust. You must learn to rely on others and allow them to rely on you." The council hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. In the end, they agreed to support Elena's vision, but only because they had no better alternatives. Slowly, humanity began to rebuild. Elena chose to step down as captain, passing leadership of the Aegis to Lieutenant Ravi Patel, a young officer eager to carry the torch. Though she still felt the weight of command, she knew it was time for a new generation to lead. Instead, she focused on working alongside Nira and Zinera to establish a coalition of survivors across the stars. Under Nira's guidance, Earth became a sanctuary for displaced beings whose worlds had been destroyed by the Harbinger. Refugees arrived daily, bringing fragments of knowledge and culture that enriched humanity's understanding of the galaxy. For the first time, humans weren't just observers, they were active participants in shaping the future. Meanwhile, Zinera shared more of her people's ancient wisdom, teaching humanity how to adapt and grow stronger. She reminded them that survival wasn't enough. They needed to evolve, to rise above their limitations, and become guardians of the stars. As months passed, hope began to take root. New alliances formed, and old rivalries faded. Humanity earned respect from former detractors, proving that even the smallest light could hold back the darkness. One evening, Elena stood on a hill overlooking Earth, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Behind her, construction crews worked tirelessly to repair damaged cities and fortify defenses. The scars of war were still visible, but so too was resilience, a quiet determination to keep moving forward. Nira joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. Handing one to Elena, she spoke gently. "You did it, you know. You gave humanity a second chance." Elena smiled faintly, though her eyes remained distant. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us. Even Kale." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of activity around them. Then Nira added, "Do you think the Harbinger is really gone?" Elena didn't answer right away. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a lingering unease, a sense that danger still lurked in the shadows. But instead of fear, she felt resolve. "If it comes back," she said finally, "we'll be ready. Because now, we're not fighting just for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who believes in a better future." And with those words, Elena turned toward the rising stars, knowing humanity's journey was far from over, but confident they were ready to face whatever came next. Years passed, and humanity transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The scars of war remained etched into the landscape, craters where cities once stood, empty skies where satellites used to orbit. But so too did new beginnings. Earth became a beacon of unity, not just for humans, but for survivors from across the galaxy. Refugees who had lost everything found solace on this resilient planet, their cultures blending with humanity's own to create something greater than the sum of its parts. Elena Voss watched it all unfold from her quiet corner of the world. She no longer wore the uniform of a captain, instead dedicating herself to diplomacy and education. Alongside Nira Solis, she helped establish the Galactic Preservation Initiative, an organization aimed at protecting civilizations from existential threats like the Harbinger. Together, they worked tirelessly to ensure that no species would ever again face annihilation alone. Zinera remained by their side as well, serving as both mentor and ally. Her knowledge of ancient technologies proved invaluable, helping humanity leapfrog centuries of development in mere years. Under her guidance, engineers rebuilt weapon systems capable of defending against even the most advanced foes. Scientists unraveled mysteries of biology and physics that had long eluded understanding. Humanity wasn't just rebuilding, it was evolving. Yet peace came with vigilance. Reports trickled in from distant sectors of space, strange anomalies detected near uncharted regions, whispers of energy signatures matching those left behind by the Harbinger. While some dismissed these findings as paranoia, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lingered. One evening, during a meeting of the Galactic Preservation Initiative, Nira presented troubling data collected from deep space probes. "These readings are faint," she explained, pointing to holographic displays showing scattered bursts of electromagnetic activity. "But they're consistent with what we observed when the Harbinger attacked before." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. If the Harbinger wasn't fully destroyed, then humanity's hard-won peace might be temporary at best. "We need to investigate," Alina said firmly, breaking the silence. "If there's even a chance it's still out there, we can't ignore it." Counselor Marcus Hale, now a staunch supporter of Alina's efforts, nodded reluctantly. "Agreed. But how do we prepare without causing panic? People are finally starting to heal." Alina exchanged a glance with Zinara, who stepped forward. "We must act discreetly," Zinara advised. "Send small teams equipped with cloaking technology to scout the areas in question. If the Harbinger is regenerating, we cannot alert it to our presence." Within days, a covert mission was launched. Pilots volunteered eagerly, driven by the memory of Cal Armitage and others who had given their lives to protect humanity. Among them was Lieutenant Ravi Patel, now commanding officer of the Aegis. Though young, he carried the weight of leadership with quiet confidence, inspired by Alina's example. As the scouting teams ventured into the unknown, humanity continued to thrive. New colonies sprang up on moons and planets previously thought uninhabitable, powered by advancements in terraforming technology. Schools taught children about the importance of cooperation, not just among humans, but across species. Art, music, and literature flourished, reflecting a society determined to embrace life despite its fragility. Back on Earth, Alina often visited a memorial erected in honor of those who had fallen. It stood overlooking the ocean, a sleek obelisk inscribed with names of heroes past, including Cal's. On quiet nights, she would sit beside it, listening to the waves crash against the shore. "Do you think we're doing enough?" Nira asked one evening, joining Alina at the memorial. Alina smiled faintly. "Probably not. But we're trying. And that's what matters." Far beyond the borders of explored space, faint pulses echoed, a reminder that darkness always lurked in the shadows. But humanity stood ready, united by courage, resilience, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest light could hold back the void. They had proven themselves once. They would do so again if needed. For now, though, they chose hope over fear and planted seeds of a brighter future among the stars. The ceremony to honor the fallen was held beneath a clear, starry sky. Thousands gathered around the memorial obelisk on Earth's coast, their faces illuminated by soft lights and the glow of distant stars. The air buzzed with quiet reverence as names were read aloud. Heroes who had sacrificed everything to protect humanity and the galaxy. Cal Armitage's name echoed longest, his bravery remembered not just as an individual act, but as a symbol of humanity's defiance against despair. Alina Voss stood at the podium, her voice steady despite the weight of emotion pressing down on her. Behind her, Nira Solis and Zinara watched silently, their presence a testament to the bonds forged through shared struggle. Today, Alina began, We remember those who gave their lives so that others might live. They taught us what it means to stand together, not just as humans, but as guardians of something greater than ourselves. Her words resonated deeply with the crowd. Survivors from countless worlds nodded in agreement, united by grief and gratitude. For many, this moment marked the first time they truly felt part of a galactic community, a family bound by resilience and hope. As the ceremony concluded, Alina stepped away from the podium and walked toward the water's edge. She gazed up at the night sky, her thoughts drifting to the challenges ahead. Reports from deep space scouts still hinted at anomalies, subtle signs that the Harbinger, or something like it, might not be fully gone. Yet instead of fear, Alina felt resolve. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged stronger. They could face whatever came next. Far above Earth, the Aegis orbited silently, its crew vigilant and ready. Lieutenant Ravi Patil paced the bridge, his young face hardened by the responsibility resting on his shoulders. Though he carried the legacy of those who came before him, he also embraced the future, a future where humanity no longer hid in the shadows, but stood tall among the stars. "We'll keep watching," Ravi said softly to himself, staring out at the endless expanse of space. "Whatever happens, we'll be ready." Back on Earth, Neera approached Alina, holding 2 cups of tea. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked, echoing a question she posed years earlier. Alina took the cup with a small smile. "No, but I think we're closer than we've ever been. We've proven we can adapt, grow, and fight for more than just survival. That's progress." Zinera joined them, her shimmering skin reflecting the moonlight. "Your species has always been underestimated," she said thoughtfully. "But now, the galaxy sees you differently. You are no longer relics or bystanders. You are defenders." Alina nodded, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't allowed herself before. Humanity wasn't perfect. They made mistakes, argued, and struggled, but they persevered. And in doing so, they inspired others to do the same. In the weeks that followed, humanity continued to rebuild and innovate. Colonies expanded, alliances strengthened, and new technologies emerged, pushing boundaries once thought insurmountable. Children grew up learning about courage and cooperation, their imaginations sparked by stories of sacrifice and triumph. Artisans crafted murals depicting battles fought and friendships forged, ensuring the lessons of the past would guide the future. Yet amidst the progress, vigilance remained. Deep space probes detected faint pulses near uncharted regions, reminders that danger still lurked beyond the horizon. Humanity didn't shy away from these warnings. They prepared. Ships patrolled the edges of known space, armed with knowledge passed down from Zinera's people and innovations born from human ingenuity. One evening, as Alina stood beside the memorial again, she noticed a child drawing in the sand nearby. The picture depicted a starship surrounded by glowing figures, all reaching toward the heavens. Smiling, Alina knelt beside the child. "What are you drawing?" she asked gently. "The future," the child replied simply, pointing to the stars above. Alina looked up, her heart swelling with hope. Humanity had come so far, from forgotten relics to guardians of the galaxy. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one truth was undeniable. They mattered. Their light burned brightly, refusing to let the darkness win. And so, under the watchful eyes of heroes past and present, humanity vowed to continue standing guard, not just for themselves, but for every being who dared to dream of a better tomorrow. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy saw humans not as relics, but as defenders willing to risk everything for the greater good. Even as faint echoes of peril lingered in the void, humanity stood ready, united, resilient, and unyielding.